All right, so it's 2:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's webinar is about coaching and how to build those systems. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but first we're going to do some housekeeping and introductions. You want to go ahead and change the slide, Kana? All right, so quick introduction. My name is Nicole Jones. I'm an agency tiered support consultant. I work down in the Springfield regional office. And I'm here today with Kana, who's going to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kana Poteet. I am the Agency Tiered Support Consultant Supervisor over the Kansas City and Albany region. I'm pretty excited to be here today to talk to you about why coaching can be beneficial to your organization and some of the ways that you can build your own coaching system in your team.
So we want you guys to know if you have any questions, feel free to put them in chat. We'll try to do our best to answer them. And if we can't, we'll try to follow up with a question and answer document. But if you do chat us, make sure you have all panelists selected, because if you select any other option, either myself or Kana may not see the chat. So if you want to ask us a question, just make sure you have all panelists selected when you put those into chat. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so a quick overview. Today we're going to be talking about the benefits of a coaching system. You know, what's there to get out of building a coaching system? Why do you do it? What's the purpose? We're also going to talk a little bit about how do you go about implementing a formal coaching system? How do you make that systemic change within your own agency? And then briefly, we're going to talk a little bit about the coaching framework tool and how we utilize it to help with implementation when we are building coaching systems throughout the agency. So the first question I have for you guys is, what kind of training strategies do you currently use for your agency? Do you use in-person training when they come into the office and come and get training? Do you have some sort of shadowing, peer mentoring going on? Do you use video modeling? Do you have some sort of competency coaching already in place? And if you use any of those kinds of strategies, or even some that I didn't mention, could you just put it in chat? We kind of want to get a feel for what everyone is using currently. All right, so I'm seeing some WebEx. Some people are using everything except for the video modeling that I talked about. I'm seeing all of those. I like that. Online relies for initial training, then in-person mentoring afterwards. That's good. In-house training, a little bit of everything. We use video modeling, role play, and feedback. Love that. All right. Okay. So we got a smorgasbord of training strategies, it looks like. Got some one-on-one training with agency management, job shadowing of other staff, making sure we're following the WebEx samples. So, but on-the-job training seems to be the most beneficial, is what I'm seeing from other people. All right, wonderful. Thank you guys for responding. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. So thank you guys for all sharing kind of the training strategies you currently employ. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of using competency coaching as a system within your agency. You want to hit the next slide. All right, so for those of you, if you could quickly in the chat, just let me know how many of you are leaders for your agency. So you could be a supervisor, you might be a house manager, you might be a director. I just kind of want to get a feel of how many leaders are on the webinar today.
Program manager.
All right, seeing quite a bit. Directors, managers, supervisors, we got the whole gamut. Perfect. Okay. So then you might feel this particular slide. How many times have you felt that maybe you just didn't get enough time doing the managerial part of your job, right? The planning and strategizing that your agency needs in order to function day to day. I get that. Sometimes you kind of get sucked into things. Well, the biggest benefit to utilizing a coaching system is that team members who are coached welcome responsibility and don't have to be chased or watched. The leaders kind of report feeling a weight being lifted off their shoulders. They have less stress and they have more time to think strategically about their day instead of getting sucked into that day-to-day operation. And it provides an environment where people feel valued. And when you have an environment where people feel valued, people are willing to go that extra mile, even without being asked. When you have an environment where people don't feel valued, you tend to see a situation where staff only do what they are told, and sometimes as little of that as possible to begin with. And there's organizations all over the world that believe in the power of coaching. Organizations like AT&T, American Red Cross, 3M, UPS, even the federal governments of the United States and Canada believe that coaching helps to develop people and increase productivity.
So just like Nicole mentioned, boosting productivity is a benefit of investing in a good coaching system. When we are making sure that we take the time, work with the staff that we want to work with, invest in those coaches, build up that good system, we are going to really improve several great areas in our organizations. One of them being this productivity factor that she just mentioned, and the other one is all about innovation. So when I talk about productivity in this manner, I'm really talking about what are the outcomes that we're getting when it comes to the staff that we're investing this time in. What are they going to be doing for us down the line? What are they going to be doing for those individuals and services? And it's really kind of overwhelming to think about how I can enhance this training, because there are a lot of factors that all have an impact on what it means to make a training successful. Trainings in the use of those virtual methods that we saw people talking about, WebExes, trainings in regards to using videos to enhance whatever it is that you're instructing people on, giving people the opportunity to practice in a training setting, giving people the opportunity to get that great feedback. I can tell that there are a couple of people in here who are going to really enjoy a slide that we're going to talk about later on. All of those things can really have an impact on training, but what we know has the most impact is having that ongoing initial and ongoing coaching system. So it really provides the necessary influence that's going to impact the training that you are providing, whether it be from documentation training all the way up to a skill-based training that you want to help staff implement better. And companies who offer this training experience alone, so they're really only doing that lecture portion, they're not really going beyond that point, they see a 22.4% increase in that level of productivity of their staff, which isn't terrible. It's definitely better than zero. But we can also say that through research, like people have studied this, they found research that backs us up, that when you implement a coaching system, you are going to increase that productivity level to 88%, which is substantial. People are going to walk away from your trainings. They're going to feel more successful long term. They're going to have more output down the road. So it also really helps when we come to innovation, because you're investing in these people. You're having this one-on-one, get to know you, engage moment with each person that you're coaching, and you really start to learn and understand what it is that their goals are, what their skills are, what they're willing to work towards, their strengths and weaknesses. It really gives you this opportunity to learn and build this great relationship and connection. And when you have that, people are more open to offering suggestions. They're more open to impacting the changes in their organization. They want to make that investment. They want to make innovative ideas come to fruition. So if you want to see cool benefits of coaching, find out how you can invest in your people, and then really look towards what they can give back to you, because I really like hearing how we can be better, and I get that every time I do a one-on-one coaching with one of my own staff. So.
All right, so another question, this is just kind of pick your brain. So what do you guys already do where you kind of go that extra mile to help your employees succeed? What are some strategies you guys are using currently?
I love open door policies.
Ooh, I like the incentives too, reinforcing staff for doing good work.
Yes.
I like that. Positive write-ups, bragging on each other, building up that positive interaction.
Birthday cupcakes? I want a birthday cupcake.
I like that. I like valuing your employees, and even just like a birthday cupcake can show that, hey, I value you being here. That is very important. The regular feedback on performance. Work anniversaries, those are cool. Yeah.
You guys are doing such positive things.
Yeah. All right. So that leads us into helping develop talent for your agency. So coaching helps this. It helps develop talent for your agency. And according to a July 2011 American Management Association survey, almost half of the participating organizations use coaching to help people prepare for a new role or promotion. But the three most common uses in the survey for coaching was leadership development, remedial performance improvement, and optimizing strong contributors for your agency, which again goes back to that boosting productivity, right? You want strong contributors within your agency and help boost that productivity, boost that innovation, and hopefully provide better services because of it. Also, coaching helps you invest in your employees' career development, right? So developing people doesn't mean you send them off on a short training course once or twice a year, right? Developing people on the job creates a learning culture that at the same time increases employee satisfaction and retention. The way you lead either develops people or it leaves them behind. But an agency with a coaching mindset is all about being responsive and responsible to employee needs. Now, I know that this is an issue within our service industry, right? Retention is an ongoing barrier, and I'm sure with the pandemic, this has been exacerbated quite a bit. It's something that many organizations struggle with. The good news is that coaching can help improve retention. Organizations that have really strong coaching cultures have more highly engaged employees than companies without a strong coaching culture, which is about 61% versus the 53%. And they also often have above average revenue growth as opposed to companies without strong coaching cultures. And people just enjoy a collaborative approach. People who use coaching leadership report that their own job satisfaction increases along with the satisfaction and retention of their team members. Coaching allows you to improve relationships and engagement within your own agency. By respecting and valuing individuals, you improve relationships, you increase engagement, and you boost the success that accompanies coaching. The very act of just asking someone a question values that person and their answer. And if you only tell, there's never an exchange, and thus no value is added to that relationship. Okay, and this is a good question, and it can be kind of a sticky thing. So if you know, on average, how much does it cost your agency to have a new employee, just hire a new employee? How much does that cost your agency, if you know?
I can tell you that for replacing one of the agency tiered support consultants, at least $8,000. That's bare minimum.
Yeah, bare minimum, at least 8,000 just to have one of us replaced.
Oh my gosh, well, $90,000?
Could be depending on the job, the technical difficulty of it, the certification of it. Could be quite a bit of money. And it's expensive, right? That retention, losing people, that's expensive, and it's hard to constantly have that revolving door because it does hurt your bottom line. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. A good thing to know is that coaching costs less than formal training, right? And it helps individuals maintain their skills over a longer period of time. So if we have one company that talked about the estimate for their monetary payout for coaching they received, and the managers had described there was an average return of about 100 grand, or about 6 times what it cost for them to implement their coaching program. And a lot of times, having those coaching relationships help you harness the strengths and qualities of your own people. It allows you to have the mindset and the skill to tap into your people's strengths. And in that way, you uncover those undeclared talents, those undeclared skills that kind of help you figure out who's the best for what, practical solutions to problems that you're running into. And the only way to really tap into that is to talk to the people who have in-depth knowledge of the problems they're facing. They're in it every single day. They have the best knowledge, and those are the people we should be tapping into to kind of fix some of those problems. Go to the next slide, please. And so I don't know how many of you guys, have you ever heard of growth mindset versus fixed mindset? If you have, go ahead and put in chat you have. And if you haven't, you can always put in chat you haven't.
Cool. Yes. Ooh.
Ooh, good. Okay, so it doesn't look like I'm gonna have to do a ton of explanation, but I'm gonna give a quick rundown of what's a fixed mindset, what's a growth mindset. So a fixed mindset believes you have fixed talents. They're static. You were either born an artist or you weren't born an artist, and that's just how it is. And there's no like really room for improvement. Whereas in a growth mindset, they believe, limit is, the potential for anybody's limit is just unlimited, right? It's just, there's no way you can be stagnant in your skills as long as you're, developing, training, and, so forth. They also look at like, failures as, just a bump on the road on that journey, as opposed to, oh God, well, this means I can't do it. They see it as, okay, well, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to move forward. So fixed mindsets, believing that you either have talent or you don't, there's some big issues with those kinds of cultures developing within your agency. A study showed that in organizations with fixed mindset cultures, where being smart and talented is prized over all of their behaviors, employees at all levels tend to hoard resources, even from their teammates, to lie more frequently to colleagues and to clients, and to blame others when things go south. And probably the worst of all, they ignore or abandon learning opportunities that would foster growth and innovation. So huge issue if you start seeing a fixed mindset culture developing within your agency. On the other end, if you have an agency that really, adopts that growth mindset, really encourages that learning and continuous development, we have found that employees with growth mindsets are 47% more likely to say their colleagues are trustworthy than fixed mindset peers. They're 34% more likely to have a strong sense of ownership and commitment to their organization. So that goes back to that retention and satisfaction. They're 65% more likely to say that their organization supports risk-taking, which goes back to that productivity and innovation and tackling those everyday problems. And then they're also 49% more likely to say their organization fosters that innovation than fixed mindset peers. So organizations where learning and growth are encouraged have a culture that is more collaborative and innovative. These organizations also place a very high premium on learning from both successes and failures, and tend to have employees who behave much more ethically. All right, so now we've talked a little bit about benefits to coaching, right? So it goes back to retention, it goes back to developing talent within your agency, it boosts productivity. It also gives you a big return on your investment. So now let's talk about the process. What does coaching actually look like? What is coaching? And then how do you take that process and make a systemic change within your agency? So, quick question. How do you guys currently teach skills to your employees? What strategies do you use? We talked a little bit about like processes before, where we had coaching or video modeling or in-person training, but how do you actually teach staff to, like, let's say, document?
Ooh.
I like that. Watch one, do one, teach one. It's good.
That's a good model to follow. The I do it and then we do it and then you're going to do it. I also have a similar one, Amy.
Explain, demonstrate, observe, and do it themselves. What I love about all your answers, I'm seeing a lot of modeling and a lot of participation, like them doing role playing themselves. I like breaking it down to different tasks and looking at what needs to be done. That's great. So a lot of you guys are implementing a lot of best practice already, which is great. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about what coaching looks like.
So one of the coolest things about talking about coaching is that we have this incredible model that we can follow. And not only does this matter and can be used when you're coaching somebody, but it also is just like the way to do trainings. We talk about the behavioral skills training model, which if you've been around before, you've heard us talk about it. It might not be very new. If you haven't, it's such a good way to think about how I'm going to get a new skill or a new thing to a person in this very structured manner. And if you know anything about tiered supports, we like structure, we like systems, we like processes. So it works out really, really well. So this BST model, I'm going to briefly cover it because I think that based off of the responses that we're getting, a lot of you are using good portions of this model. So I'm going to briefly touch on what this looks like. So in the BST model, we have instruction, modeling, rehearsal, and then feedback. In instruction, it focuses around your ability to explain the reasons why somebody might need to do this skill, how somebody might need to do this skill, when somebody might need to do this skill. So it answers all of those questions of why is this important, should I care, yes you should, here's how to do it, and all the reasons behind the why. So that's a little bit about instruction. This can come through video models, it can come through face-to-face, in person, it can come on-site or in the classroom. The next thing that it follows is modeling, and that's my ability to demonstrate the skill for you so that I'm going to do it, and then we're going to do it, and then you're going to do it, is towards that modeling function of let me demonstrate this skill for you. Again, this can be done through video examples. It can be done through role play examples, just some way to show the person, here's how you would facilitate X, Y, and Z. And then it follows rehearsal or practicing that skill. So I would find that a lot of the trainings that we look at when we're going in and evaluating organizational systems is the lack of having someone practice that skill in the moment and getting immediate feedback. So give people the opportunity to demonstrate their understanding of this thing that you just taught them. Can they reteach it to you? Can they teach it to somebody else? Can they demonstrate this skill when you ask them to? Please pull out the medication for this person at this time and walk me through those steps. So that's a lot about that rehearsal and practice. And then it's followed by immediate feedback. That immediate feedback is so, so, so important because if you don't say anything and you're just like, cool, awesome, and you walk away, we won't know if I was successful or not or what I might need to work on in the future. So feedback is a combination of here are all of the things you did successfully, as well as I'd also like you to try these things next time. That's that corrective feedback, that thing that we're gonna practice further and further down the line. So in a training situation, this can be really structured. It can be as long and hard as you want it to be. And then in a coaching manner, when you're maybe in the environment or doing it right then and there, it might have to be a little bit more flexible. But typically, you really want to make sure that you give them the chance to demonstrate that skill and get feedback from you as the expert in that. And that's really just a quick snapshot overview of what BST is asking for.
Wonderful. So this model is really effective, and there's lots of evidence to support that it works. It works to teach skill and help individuals maintain their skills over time. So how do you take something that works so well and turn it into a system? The way I think about systems, and frequently we think about systems, is three real big parts. One is our procedures, right? It's written out what's happening, when's it happening, who's doing it, right? That's all written out. We also then have our agency practice. So what actually happens? So we might have a procedure, but if it's in a dusty binder somewhere and nobody follows it, well, then it's not part of our agency practice. So we have to have both procedures and then that agency practice that's following the procedures that we've outlined. And then the final most crucial part, and you'll hear about it all the time in tiered supports, is that database decision making. So is it working? Are we doing it? Those questions are things that we're going to be looking at whenever we're going through and assessing, is the system really effective? So if we develop a coaching system, is it effective? Is it working like we intended? Or if it's not, what do we need to do to adapt the system or maybe change about it so that way we do get that effectiveness we're hoping for? Because why build something if it's not going to be effective? So you can have a coaching system that's really elaborate, got lots of moving parts, or you can have a very simple coaching system. It really depends on your agency needs, your resources, on what's the going to be the best thing for you. But the one thing it has to be is, again, that effectiveness. We need to see that. So it can be as simple or as elaborate, but it must be effective. So we're going to dive into procedures first, and talk a little bit about, like, what would you need to think about when you're talking about procedures with your agency. Well, one of the first things to think about is that onboarding process, right? We want to flesh this out first. How do we introduce our coaching system to our employees? How do we make sure that people are aware of it when they first come on to this agency? So we might think about the training procedures. So when a new employee comes on, what the training procedures happen? What trainings do they have to have? What do we need to have necessary for to get them on the floor? What do we need to have them necessary to be a new manager and supervise people? Like, what kind of training needs to happen? Who's doing that training? Also, think about timelines. So what are the timelines for these trainings? That's a lot of moving parts when you have a new employee come on and they have to have so many trainings before they can, be effective in their job. So thinking about, what are those timelines? What is the most important thing we need to work on? What can wait? Those are things that will need to be worked out in your procedures. And then, how do you prepare staff? So how do you introduce staff to the system, right? New employee orientation, is that where we do it? Is it an ongoing thing? Do we have a new employee orientation checklist that we go through and make sure things are hit? What do we do to prep staff and make sure that they are really well versed, and this is how we do coaching at this agency? And then think about your onboarding processes right now, and does that set your person up for success? Next slide.
So now I want to talk to you a little bit about competency procedures. So Nicole walked you through some components necessary to build a good training procedure, but now I want you to look at that competency component. When we look at competency, we're trying to identify just a few things, and this is not like all-encompassing. There's a lot more steps to consider, but generally we look at the initial and ongoing competency component, our timelines, the roles that are going to be done, and whether or not we have checklists to help us keep on track. So what I mean when I say initial and ongoing competency, I'm looking at, what does it look like to ensure that staff are competent? And when I say competent, I mean that they can do that skill on the regular when you are or are not around. Can they demonstrate that skill and do it successfully? Are there remediation processes in place? Like, what if a person doesn't meet competency? Do you have a method to make sure that there's that extra step or that extra level of support to get that person to the next stage? Are you offering some sort of refresher for those staff who are struggling as well? Could your team members request some level of extra ongoing coaching? So they have their first initial competency check, you check them off, they're good to go. Are you naturally following up on a regular basis with that coaching, that coachee? Research suggests that you should do maybe one per week. That's a lot. So we're going to talk about how you can feasibly do that, depending on the number of staff that you have employed in your agency. But can you think about all of these potential things about what can this person do to request or get extra support in the event that they need it when they're not meeting that initial competency? We also want to think about timelines. So how soon does this person need to get initial competency, and how frequently are we going to get that person competency checks afterwards? What we typically do, so if you've ever been through a tools of choice class, you might have seen an ATSC 15, 30, and then 45 days after you finish your tools class. Now that's just what we can feasibly do, but we also have a lot of people to coach. So we have to cut ourselves off at some point, otherwise we won't be able to get all of the people. And now that might be something you need to figure out what's that going to look like. You also need to think about who's going to be doing these competency checks. Are they going to be house managers? Are they going to be program managers? Are they going to be administrators, your agency trainer? Depending on who you have, resources-wise, people-wise, that might be a hard question to answer. So you want to think about who could feasibly do this
and just incorporate it regularly into their normal job functions. And then lastly, one of the biggest things is, do we have competency checklists? Are we ensuring that the coach knows what it is that they are looking for, and that they can accurately and consistently measure the success or not success of that skill? When I go out and I'm looking for skills of the trainings that we teach, I have a checklist that says they need to do this, 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 and this. Does it have to be in that order? No, but I need to see them do every single one of these skills before I can say, yes, you've shown me that you are competent and you can do this skill successfully. So really think about those competency checklists. So now we want to ask you a quick question. And this is kind of a little opportunity to self-evaluate, to self-assess your current procedure around coaching and training. So I want you to think really hard about this. Do you have a written onboarding training? Do you have something written down that you train to all new staff every time that you get a new staff? If you did, good job, Erica. Yes, she's like, yes, we do. Okay. Within that training, I'd like for you to answer these questions. So you're going to give yourself either a score of 1 out of 3, a 3 out of 3, a 2 out of 3. So do you have a time frame in how long a new staff needs to complete that onboarding training? Do you have a person who teaches it? And do you have training and coaching checklists that you can use to make sure that you're following everything that you need to in that training? So do you have 1 out of the 3? Do you have 2 out of the 3, 3 out of the 3? This is a really good way to quickly assess whether or not you've got some of these components in place. Anywhere from a 1 to 3, I like it. Okay, I got you. So we don't have a timeline, that's all right. We're getting a lot of 2s to 3s. 66%, yo. Awesome. Excellent.
So what's really great about this is if you need help in assessing your current training or coaching, feel free to reach out to the tiered support consultants, because that's what they're trained to do. So just a little plug that if you're like, hey, I want to know how I can beef this up, you could reach out to your regional tiered support consultants and they could totally help you. And we got some other things that we'll talk about at the end that you could also come to.
We're pre-teaching here. But I would say that a lot of agencies that we interact with, a lot of providers out there do have a really strong core startup. They got that good training system in place. They know what they're looking for. So we're going to do another one of these assessments just a little bit later to look at the next part of your coaching and training program.
Okay, so continuing with procedures, think about fidelity. So when we're talking about fidelity, this is the are we doing it? So what procedures do we have in place to make sure we're following procedures? So procedures to follow procedures, if that makes any sense. And we're gonna have some goals. So let's say we wanna have, let's say we're doing those coaching observations and we wanna have at least 80% coaching observations for our staff for that week. That would be our goal, is 80. And we wanna see, are we meeting that goal consistently? Are we hitting like we need to do? And then what happens when we have gaps or turnover? So if we lose a coach, what happens then? Does our system just crumble to dust and we can't, meet the functions that we've set up? Or do we have some sort of gap coverage outlined in our procedures of, should this person leave, this is how everything's shifted around, so that way we still hit those goals that we want to and don't have any service disruptions? And then also think about reliability. How are you going to reinforce staff for being meeting that fidelity component, right? And hitting that 80% goal and making sure that staff, are being recognized for those efforts. Those are all things to think about when you're thinking about fidelity procedures.
All right, next we're going to talk about your coaches, the people who are going to be implementing the system that you have created. Maybe you already have some of these people, maybe you really need to beef them up, maybe you need to identify somebody. So here are some things to think about when you're looking at defining a coach. Thinking about selection and placement, who's going to be doing it, where are they going to be doing it, how are you going to get them out there through deployment, do you need a training coordinator, and do you have some sort of ongoing professional development? So when we look at selection and placement, is there a process that you have internally to help you identify coaches to help your agency long term? Are you keeping an eye out for those people? Does your HR keep an eye out for those people? Do you have an annual survey that looks for some of these skills that you want as an agency coach? And can you look at these people and say, yes, they have the time and the necessary skill set that I am looking for? It's something to think about when you're creating not only job performance and development in your organization, but it also can be something that you think about when you're hiring new people. When you're thinking about how you're going to get these people out there, you know, consider, where are these coaches going to go? Do you want one for every single ISL or environment that you have in your services? Do you want them in just certain locations? Can they be deployed across all environments in your organization? Are they expected to do regular ongoing coaching? If you have, you know, 50 staff and 2 coaches, is that feasible? If you have 25 staff and 8 coaches, is that overdoing it? You know, you really want to make sure that you're using your resources reliably and successfully here. When you think about how big your organization is, I would recommend that you consider getting a training coordinator who's going to organize all of these moving parts into something that's going to be functional and successful. Does there need to be somebody who oversees the coaching system? And some of the providers that we've talked to, we have a couple of people who oversee their coaching system, because we also recognize that you have dual roles. You're doing a lot of jobs at once. So don't think it needs to be one person. You can always spread this out based off the resources that you have available to you. And then lastly, how are you going to continuously maintain the skills of those coaches? Do you have ongoing trainings that you're providing them? Is your training coordinator the person who provides that professional development? Do they have their own coach that's going to help them get there? Luckily for most of you, if you are a part of the Tiered Supports program, you have unlimited access to expert level coaches who can give you that professional development through one-on-one phone calls, through practice and feedback opportunities, through virtual coaching workshops. We have a lot of ways to help boost your coaches to be the best that they can be. So if you're like, man, I can think about lots of these things, but I'm struggling on that professional development, well, we've got you covered. So really invest in your coaches and help them feel supported and that they're doing a good job. All right.
All right, so the last bit of procedures is talking about data collection procedures. So really outlining what kind of data are you collecting. It should be not collecting data just for data's sake. It should relate to what you want to see, right? So that goal that we talked about that you have for your system and seeing if it's effective, that's the data you should be collecting to see, is it effective, right? And you also want to look at, are we doing it? So that fidelity data, are we actually saying what we're actually going to do? And then also think about like the process. So who collects the data? How do they collect it? Once they've collected it, where does it go? All those things need to be kind of worked out. And then regarding data aggregation review procedures, again, you have to have that process. So data's been collected, it's been inputted somewhere, then who's responsible for pulling that data and making sense of it and seeing trends and deficits and excesses that we need to maybe make some decisions about, like, oh, you know, we're seeing this team's really struggling. So what can we do to support that team and make sure that they're really getting the training that they need and that coaching that they need? Also think about, how do we share the data? You know, what's the form of communication that we're going to do? Are we going to discuss it at meetings? Do we send it out in emails? You know, what are we doing to make sure that the data is not just, you know, collected, visualized, and then goes nowhere else? We don't do anything else with it, because that would be inefficient. And then thinking about, how do you share data? So are you going to share data with your staff and talk to them about it? Are you going to be sharing with your stakeholders and talking to them about it, and being really open in showing, you know, the successes and some of the struggles, to, again, bring in other opinions, bring in other perspectives, and to hopefully, you know, kind of problem solve. All right, so that leads us to another assessment, I think.
Yes. Okay, so just like we did before, I want you to look at these components and assess whether or not you have them in place. So do you have a written ongoing competency training? Do you have something that's going to be competency focused with the following? An identified on-site coach, an evaluation measure that you can have for your trainer, and you have data collection systems in place. And I'm seeing some maybe trickle in now. Okay, we got a 1 out of 3, 33%. Okay, I see 0. some ones and some twos. Yay, Laura, identified on-site coaches. That's sometimes even the most hardest thing to accomplish. All right, so what's cool about this is that we also are going to have in the near future a tool for you to go into a deeper dive of the self-evaluation. So if this is really helpful for you and you can identify which components you're missing, we're going to offer you something a little bit more in depth that's going to make this whole system making much easier, because you can be like, I need to start right here. So I want to talk a little bit about, are we doing it? Because I'm sure you've heard many, many times this idea of, are we doing it and is it working? So we want to make sure that we are doing what we say that we are doing, whether that be through fidelity measures, through the fidelity of the procedures, which just means, are you doing and following the procedures that you have spent so much time outlining? Are those being met? Are those being followed? Do you have effective and sustainable systems in place? Not only are they actually doing what you want them to do, but are they long-term sustainable? It's not just like we can do these for a couple of months and then we're like, okay, we're done, we don't need to do them anymore. These things have to go long-term, past the point that you might even be here. That's what we're talking about when we say sustainable. Are you communicating your systems and your data and your everything on a regular basis? Do people know about them, and can they make sure that they say, even if I'm not 100% sure, I know where to find them because I know that I have great communication with my leaders and my coaches? Are they accessible? Exactly what I said. I might not know all of them all yet, but I definitely know where to find them to evaluate whether or not I'm doing them successfully. So are we doing it? Lots of evaluation measures.
Okay, so now that we've kind of covered practice, let's talk about the database decision making. So again, we're looking at data collection. You know, is it accurate data collections that we're putting in and collecting? Are data inputs accurate and reliable data entry? I know that's something that we struggle with, even of that reliable data entry. And the data aggregation, are you using data visuals? Like, are you using graphs, or are you just looking at a bunch of numbers on a page? It's a big difference when you're making data decision making and looking at trends if you have it visualized versus if you have just a bunch of numbers. And then again, that data review, who's making the decisions? You know, do we have admin at the meeting, you know, looking over that data and discussing it and coming up with a decision that's hopefully going to make an improvement to our system, right? Because that's what we're looking for, is that effectiveness. And so that data will show us, are there breakdowns? Are things, you know, not working well? Is it not sustainable? We just can't keep it up. And what do we need to change? And that database decision making will really help you identify where those breakdowns are and what can you do about it. All right, let's move on. So some next steps. So some things we want to talk about, if you go to the next slide, is the coaching framework tool. This is a tool that we will have available on the website eventually. We also have instructions for it. And then if you're a tiered support agency, you'll be able to get with your tiered support consultant, and they can help you go through this process of framing out a coaching system, right? And building that framework, and then implementing. So now that we kind of have this like rough idea of this is what we want, how do we go about even implementing it? Because it's a big thing. It's a lot of things to think about, a lot of moving parts. How do you implement successfully? It's no small feat for sure. And so we do this for lots of system designs, and we would do the same thing for coaching framework. So if you're interested, we'll have it on the website eventually, and we will also have the tiered support consultants be able to help you as well.
So in relation to that coaching framework, we also would recommend that you start to build up your action plan around coaching steps that you want to accomplish. So if you found that when you did those self-assessments, that there are components that you were missing, add them to your action plan. If you don't know how to make an action plan, there are resources on the DMH website on action planning. We have a great webinar that was done by Ree Evans. And she goes into all of those great components of what it means to build an action plan and make it clear and attainable. So you can look at these action examples that we have on the screen here that talks about my objective is to develop this formal coaching system. It all ties back to this grander goal that I have about developing and training a coach to get those staff up to where I want them to be. We identify who's going to do it, when it's going to be done, and whether or not it got there. So when you're working individually or privately, an action plan can be a great way to drive your organization to success. And if you want extra help You can always reach out to your regional agency tiered support consultant team. We know a lot about action plans. We talk about them a lot. So if you're like, who could I ask? Who is my agency tiered support consultant? Well, we can definitely get those resources to you as well.
Yeah, so
So
what I like about action plans, sorry, real quick, Kayla. What I like about action plans is like, you know, how do you eat an elephant? You take a bite at a time. And that's essentially what you're doing here is you're going to take this big idea and you're going to break it down into workable pieces to where you could implement month by month. And it's not this big overwhelming project. So.
Yes. It's so much more fun when it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So what other cool things are coming that can help you develop or enhance your coaching system? Well, there are a couple of really cool resources that the tiered supports team across the state of Missouri are working on actively to provide to you on a regular basis. We are going to be hosting coaching workshops. We're going to be hosting those in our official tiered support workshop series. Hopefully towards the fiscal year, we're going to be offering those to a wide-reaching group of people. It is going to be focused on evaluating your current coaching systems in whatever capacity, whether that's from delegation to documentation to medication to anything that you want. There's a lot of Asians here in this field. We can help you evaluate your current systems and then help you build that action plan of what that system can look like. We also are going to identify and talk about how to optimize that coaching procedure and that coaching system that you have in place, and then how you're going to track it with data and review that data. Because if you're collecting data and you're not using it for anything, you're spending a lot of energy with information just slipping through your fingers. So these coaching workshops are going to be really, really beneficial to you. I hope that you join us when they come out. In the meantime, we do have virtual coaching workshops available to our agency coaches and to really anybody who's interested, so we can get those out to you as well. And those might also be on our website. Yes, Nicole is nodding, saying that yes, they are also on our website, so you can go find that and do some one-on-one coaching practice with us.
All right, so if anyone has questions, feel free to put them in chat. You can also email your questions to ATSC Steering Committee at dmh.mo.gov. We would love to take any questions that you have, whether it's just like, hey, who is my regional tiered support team? How can I get in contact with them? We can set you up with that. And we would love to see you guys come to these coaching workshops. They are for all agencies, not just tiered agencies. So feel free to take advantage of any resources we have, take advantage of the webinars we already have recorded. And if you don't have any further questions, that's the end of our presentation, and we thank you guys for coming. We hope we kind of broke down what a systemic coaching system is and what that looks like, and some ideas of how to implement in your agency.
Yes, thank you guys.
You guys have a wonderful Monday. Thanks for coming.